Last week I stood here telling you guys this weekend would be do or die for Mercedes in Barcelona. And wow, what a weekend they had. It must have been a real roller coaster of emotions for the boys from Brackley, and they even ended up on the podium. So what does this mean for the championship race for the rest of the season and even next year? Let's dive in. After having won 8 world championships in a row, Mercedes are used to driving up front. But when this season opened at Bahrain, the car was bouncing around like a kangaroo and didn't show the speed they showed on the sim. This porpoising forced them to increase ride height, thus triggering other problems, such as lower top speed and worse handling. They simply couldn't fully unlock the potential of their zero side pod concept. After free practice 1 in Miami, the problem of the bouncing seemed to have eased, but as the track got faster, it was bouncing around like a kangaroo again, to put it in the words of Toto Wolff. And as the team went to Spain, big improvements had to be made. This is the first time this season all teams are back at the track where the season kicked off with winter testing. And that means it's always the place to be for big technical improvements. With comparable and reliable data in for the first time, teams learn to understand the cars and in which way to develop it. If the upgrades Mercedes brought here would not have worked, radical decisions would have to be made, not only to salvage this season, but also the next. Now, every year the Spanish Grand Prix is the race to watch for everyone who loves the more technical aspects of this sport. The flurry of updates gives us rare insights into the thinking of the teams and their development work. For Mercedes, these upgrades had to be spot on, and so they even secretly tested them during a day on Paul Ricard that was meant to be for filming only. But the most interesting part is the solution they brought wasn't one big silver bullet. Instead, it was a sort of rain of minor tweaks. The floor got an update with some extra winglets, and the shape of it was slightly changed as well. They also placed a winglet on the underside of the nose, and they brought different spec front wings. And maybe they did shed some weight as well. By the time the weekend really fired up, the Mercedes team knew where they were. They both made Q3 quite easily, and Lewis Hamilton ended qualifying 5th. George Russell did it even better in 4th. Looking at the times, they were pretty even. Hamilton was beaten by 1/10 of a second by Russell, and that's pretty much what we've seen all year long. These two guys are very close to each other in qualifying. But by the end of the day, they were still about a second behind the leader, which is quite a large margin, especially on this circuit. But what's just as important is something we didn't see: kangaroos. The bouncing seems to have been solved, although Russell did mention that it was still an issue in high-speed corners. The Mercedes cars were also visibly lower to the tarmac during the entire sessions, which means that they seem to have found a solution to their issues without putting the car higher, and that is big gain. But there is a catch here. The Circuit de Catalunya is the first high downforce circuit they visit this year. This means speeds are lower than the previous circuits, and the balance of the car is different altogether. So it's hard to tell whether it is really solved on high-speed circuits as well. Because of the higher fuel loads, bouncing wasn't the biggest problem for Mercedes during the races, and it didn't seem to be a big problem in Spain either. Instead, Hamilton drove into a different problem, or rather, the problem pretty much drove into him. An incident with Magnussen brought Britain to the back of the pack, at which point he seemingly asked his team to retire the car, saying it's better to save the engine. His team told him he was driving for 8th, and he eventually got up to 4th until a water pump broke and he ended 5th. Still very impressive. But the race of George Russell gave us a bit more information on where they stand compared to the frontrunners. Russell held up Verstappen, who had problems with his DRS, and so we saw how fast the Mercedes is on the straights. Still, they did seem to lose quite a lot of time in the corners though. What's worse is they again had some problems cooling the engine during the race. Now, looking at all the results, it's easy to say they're back! But are they? Because of the reliability of the data and layout of the track, we can say if the updates work in Spain, they will work everywhere. But looking at the race pace, it's quite clear they're not as fast as either the Ferraris or the Red Bulls. And looking at the championship standings, they're 75 points behind Red Bull and Russell is 36 points behind Verstappen. So realistically, they are out of those championships. But with George Russell working as systematic and concentrated as he does, Mercedes will be a force to be reckoned with again. They will steal points from the true frontrunners. And it's interesting to see where those points will go. So, what do you think? Is Mercedes out of the championships or still in? Please do leave your comments, and of course, see you next week!